You're watching The Big Story. I'm Haryanto. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you will not miss an episode. At least 3 Singaporean entities are identified in classified military documents that were allegedly stolen by hackers and leaked online for sale. The 3 entities are ST Electronics, the Republic of Singapore Air Force, and an individual, Muhammad Ali Abdul Rahiman, also known as Muawiyah, and identified as a high-value individual under a list of people categorized as terrorists. In response to ST's queries, a Defence Ministry spokesman says it's aware of the leak of some training-related materials and that according to its preliminary assessment, the documents don't contain current or sensitive information, but an investigation is ongoing. The confidential data is believed to also include documents from Nato, missile manufacturer MBDA Missile Systems, as well as 2 countries, Italy and the Philippines. Now here's my colleague, correspondent David Sun with more.
Earlier this week, the leak was put up online for sale by hackers, and it was put up for about $1,000 US. From what we understand, these were part of a larger leak of NATO documents that actually surfaced online around last year. But this time around, it's being sold for much cheaper. So what we did was we got our hands on the sample. And from the sample, we narrowed down several Singaporean entities that were listed inside these documents, several of which were listed as secret and confidential. Amongst the 3 entities, Singaporean entities that we identified, one of them is a Singaporean who is on a terror list. And he's been a known figure in the terrorist kind of scene for a while now. Another entity that was also included in the sample that we found was ST Electronics, which has been rebranded to ST Engineering. It lists a project there and several people who are part of the project, but we're still not sure as to whether it was a breach, where this breach came from, so we're still trying to find out. So the 3rd entity that we identified was the RSAF, which apparently was named because of their training manuals that were part of the catalogue. We don't actually have the details of what these documents contain, but they are part of the catalogue that was provided to us in the sample. Now, there are still a few unanswered questions as to how this leak came about, where these breaches were, but we're trying to find out more and find out more of the implications on what this means for Singaporeans.
Over in Malaysia, former Prime Minister MUHYIDDIN has been charged with 4 counts of abuse of power involving 232.5 million ringgit or about 70 million Sing dollars over projects awarded under his government's COVID-19 stimulus program. The Bersatu chief has also been charged with 2 counts of money laundering involving 195 million ringgit. Bail has been set at 2 million ringgit with 2 sureties, and Mr. MUHYIDDIN's international passport is being held until the case concludes. If convicted, he faces a jail term of up to 20 years and fine no less than 5 times the value he's alleged to have gained. The opposition party says it is also expecting Mr. MUHYIDDIN to be hit with another corruption charge on Monday. The former Premier is pleading not guilty to all current charges, calling it organised political persecution.
Saya dapati keputusan untuk mendakwa saya sebenarnya telah dibuat lebih awal oleh pihak yang paling berkuasa dalam pentadbiran negara sebelum siasatan dilengkapkan. Mereka hanya menggunakan agensi penguatkuasa sebagai alat untuk mencapai tujuan politik mereka. Jelas, pendakwaan ke atas saya adalah satu bentuk pemangsaan politik yang terancang. It is an organized political persecution. Ini kerana setelah siasatan dibuat, didapati tidak ada 1 sen pun wang rakyat masuk ke poket saya sendiri sepanjang saya menjadi Perdana Menteri. Ini tentunya berbeza sekali dengan fitnah yang dilemparkan ke atas saya. Kononnya saya melewengkan 600 bilion wang pakej rangsangan ekonomi semasa pandemik COVID-19. Dan kini terbukti tuduhan itu adalah satu fitnah jahat yang direka semata-mata untuk mencemarkan imej saya, keluarga saya dan parti saya.
Joining me now from Kuala Lumpur is Malaysia Bureau Chief Shannon Teo. Shannon, Mr. MUHYIDDIN Yassin's party, Bersatu, along the Perikatan Nasional Coalition it is part of, has always claimed that it's clean and free of corruption. So how have the optics changed for PN, if at all, with the charges brought against Mr. MUHYIDDIN today?
Well, I mean, obviously it raises some doubt amongst those who have always kind of thought of Tan Sri Muhyiddin and his party and even his coalition as being clean, free of corruption or politicians with integrity. Any kind of charge like this will raise some doubt in the minds of not just supporters, general public, even externally. Obviously in Singapore, there's now some thinking about whether Muhyiddin took the money or not. So obviously this has to go to trial. But I mean, what's going to be the optics for political observers, for voters who are very keenly following politics, is how does Perikatan Nasional, especially Bersatu, now compare to the people who are in government? And obviously we know that in November we had to form what we call a unity government between Pakatan Harapan and Barisan Nasional. And Barisan Nasional, obviously the lead party there is UMNO. And both Pakatan and Perikatan campaigned very hard during the November general elections to say that UMNO was tainted with corruption and not learned his lesson, is full of what they call penyamun. There was even a song about these robbers that were in Barisan Nasional. So the question now is, are they going to buy this idea that Perikatan Nasional is more corrupt than Barisan Nasional just because there are charges being laid against PN leaders? But not against BN leaders. But we already know that from the previous term, people like even Zahid Hamidi, who is now Deputy Prime Minister, appointed Deputy Prime Minister by Anwar, he is facing charges as well. And these are carried forward from the last term. So will people really buy this idea that it's the people in the opposition who are corrupt and not the people in government? That remains to be seen.
So, Shannon, on that, this is not the first time that corruption charges are being brought up against the opposition. Mr. Muhyiddin is calling it political persecution. It does look like the MACC is targeting opposition politicians, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this whole idea of selective persecution or selective prosecution, well, I think that using that narrative, it does kind of, there is some truth to it, I suppose, if you were a political observer in Malaysia, because as you mentioned, it always seems like it's someone in opposition that is brought up with corruption charges. It's never someone who is in government. It might be because when they were in government and then now they're in opposition and then they get charged. But if they were in opposition before and then they enter government, those charges seem to be dropped or kind of magically disappear or get postponed down the road. And this is pretty consistent, right? So I'm not trying to point out certain individuals and say, actually, this person is guilty, actually, this person is not guilty, but it is an unhealthy trend. Why is this happening? Are only people in the opposition corrupt? It's a very weird situation, a very weird trend that is happening. I mean, it is a mark against our institutions, our law enforcers, our anti-graft body. Are they really fair and free? I think this question will fairly arise because as you mentioned, it does seem to be people on one side of the political fence who get brought to court. Now, whether they are guilty or not, that's up to the courts. And in various situations, the courts have decided that people are or are not guilty. So I don't think this besmirches the judiciary as much. It really kind of casts a spotlight on the institutions, the police, the anti-graft agencies, things like that.
And Shannon, the charges come at an interesting time, keeping Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's biggest and most powerful critic preoccupied while Parliament passed Mr. Anwar's budget. Your thoughts?
Well, there was never really a real chance that the government wouldn't be able to pass its budget. It does enjoy a very healthy majority in Parliament. Of course, the question is more about how the opposition would be able to debate and to poke holes in the government's budget. So without Muhyiddin being there, obviously they would think that they would have an easier time of it. But the budget is actually not the main thing that I think people should be looking at. There are 6 state elections. They are going to happen in July and August of this year. So this is really about who controls the narrative coming up to the state elections. Is the narrative going to be that Perikatan Nasional is full of corrupt leaders, or is it going to be that the government is engaging in selective persecution, abusing its power to drag opposition figures to court now? So this is basically the battle, the narrative that's going to come to a head at the state elections, which are going to happen in about 4 or 5 months from now. Now, these state elections are going to be, quite important and quite a crucial point for us to look at the stability of the current government. We know that it's made up of several coalitions, several different parties. If they do badly, people might start getting a cold feet about being in this government and maybe feeling like, it's Perikatan Nasional that is on the rise. But let's not forget that if you remember the Sheraton move in 2020, the government then, under Pakatan Harapan, lost a by-election very badly. And that really kind of gave Malay Muslim MPs in the government cold feet. And in a few months' time, the government collapsed and they reformed a new government with the then opposition parties. So this is actually a clear and present danger even right now for this government. So it wants to do well at these state elections. You will see a lot of rhetoric, a lot of political debate going back and forth about whether Perikatan Nasional is corrupt or it is actually the government that is abusing its power.
Shannon, thank you for your perspectives. ST's Malaysia Bureau Chief, Shannon Teo. In other news, President Halimah Yacob and Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong have written to Xi Jinping to congratulate him on his reappointment as China's president. Mr. Xi secured a precedent-breaking third 5-year term, tightening his grip as China's most powerful leader since Mao Zedong. Now, it comes after the near 3,000 members of China's National People's Congress voted unanimously for the 69-year-old to be president again in an election where there was no other candidate. Back home, the Red Lions won't be parachuting their way into the heartland for this year's National Day Parade. Well, that's according to tender documents seen by the Straits Times, which state that free-fall display operations will only be conducted in Padang. The change comes amid a review of such jumps after a parachutist was injured due to a rough landing at last year's parade. Now, in response to queries, the NDP 2023 Organising Committee said that more details will be released closer to National Day. And if you're looking for an eco-friendly staycation option, you will soon be able to place your bookings for the Tiny Houses project on Lazarus Island from May 1st. While regular rates have not been announced yet, more than 600 people have registered their interest in the early bird rates that start from $199. In addition to the tiny houses, there will be other amenities such as overnight glamping experiences and non-motorized water activities that will be launched in phases from June. I'll be sure to check out the tiny houses. Well, those are our top stories today. Visit straitstimes.com for more news and our YouTube channel for more videos. Subscribe by clicking the red button below. I'm Haryanto Diman. Have a good weekend and we'll see you next week.